Civil rights is a luxury that billions of people can never afford. And throughout our past, it's almost a taboo, only surfacing for small periods of time. During much of the world's recent history, tyrants have been in power, degrading their own people in favor of greed and corruption. However, there's an opposition to this. Starting in the 19th century, the civil rights movement gave people a hope for a better future. And it was one of the largest movements in modern history, with revolutions and protests sweeping the entire globe. Despite the freedom we are so accustomed to having, there are still instances where people have to stand up and fight for their rights, fight for the civil and the basic human liberties that they deserve. The past is indefinitely influencing the civil disobedience we experience in our present timeline, with the civil rights movement in the 60s leaving a lasting impact on our society today. Martin Luther King Jr. was a great crusader of civil rights, with his famous March on Washington and all his other speeches and protests. He was so passionate about his beliefs that he gave his life doing what he loved, which was loving everyone despite all the hate he was accustomed to having. His ideas of nonviolent protests still affect us today, as we still see protests about injustice and inequality being peacefully carried out. And in the 1940s, Gandhi won the independence of an entire nation, over 300 million people, without firing a single shot. It took courage and determination, coupled with grueling hours in the sun waving picket signs and trying to persuade the world that they were people too. Freedom fighters certainly were not treated like people during this time, as others would spit on them or hurl vulgar remarks in their directions, even physically attack Gandhi and his followers, jailing all of them. However, he stood steadfast no matter what, despite being jailed for what he believed was right. Both these leaders paid for millions of people's freedoms with blood, sweat, and their lives. But because of them, the world we live in is integrated and more empathetic towards all cultures, all races. Without them in the past, there still might be segregation, colonial rule, widespread discrimination, and other horrendous practices. But think about America. We exist here today because hundreds of years ago, our forefathers set forth a doctrine of equality to provide a home and shelter for all, to nourish the unfed, and birth a new era of equality and humanity. However, almost 250 years later, these promises of freedom and liberty are still not met. From tycoons to tyrants, dictators to capitalists, racial hatred to unprecedented propaganda campaigns, we are still controlled by unseen forces that often instigate injustice within our own societies. To get rid of the racist mindset, we would have to show the world that we are all humans. We must continue the work that Dr. King, Gandhi, Rosa Parks, Nelson Mandela, and